Want to welcome these gentlemen to the stage. Very excited to have all of them with us, not a few of them. The 4 J's joining us today, so we appreciate that. Let's start down at the end. You kind of got an introduction on their title, but part of what I wanted these guys to do to kind of break the ice today is not only introduce themselves and talk a little bit about where they come from, but also share maybe their favorite piece of live social content that they've seen in the last 6 months or last academic year, whatever it may be. It can be your own. It can be something you've seen from someone else that you were really impressed with. So Jonathan, at the end, introduce everyone. A lot of people in the room know you, but
oh, really?
I think they do. I think your reputation precedes you.
Oh, wow. Hopefully it's good.
Yeah.
Jonathan Gant, Director of New and Creative Media for Clemson Athletics. Kind of a two-pronged role, creative director, but also digital director. Fortunate to work with a lot of great people, some of whom are in the room today, and I'm going to totally embarrass them and ask them to all stand up. My solid orange brigade over here.
Yeah, you can pick them out of a crowd, definitely.
I asked them to laugh at all of my lame jokes. I'm really counting on them for that. Man, nailed it. It was totally worth it to wake up at 6 a.m. and bring all of you guys here just for that. But importantly, we actually have 3 students as part of that group. Nick Conklin is our lead videographer, Jeff Cowan, lead designer, and then 3 students, Forrest, Jake, and Becca. Obviously very thankful to SVG for letting us bring them today, and hopeful that you all will get a chance to meet them. They're really talented rising stars in the industry that hopefully could make an impact beyond Clemson after their careers there. But yeah, in terms of live content, a lot of the stuff is what that group has created. I think we've been fortunate because our football team has been so successful the last couple of years to have some really great moments to capture. Stuff that was planned, like doing a 360 broadcast from our locker room at the college football playoff semifinal, to stuff that you could never plan on, but luckily we were there to capture in terms of a national championship parade. And those really memorable experiences that, you know, the reach and the exposure and the engagement numbers are incredible because of the situation that we're in. So a lot of great examples, fair amount of misses as well over the course of the last 2 years too. So we'll get into that. But very happy to be here. Thankful to SVG for having me. And again, hopefully get a chance to meet some of our students and Jeff and Nick as well today.
Cool. Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason George. I'm the chief exec of a company called Telescope. We spent about 14 years helping content creators make their content more engaging on platforms like television. And the last kind of couple of years, you know, seeing that really migrate towards social and digital platforms. We were a launch partner of Facebook Live, so we have a software that enables you to connect, stream your content there, add a ton of stuff around audience interactivity and engagement, and really kind of bring that social bit. So, you know, there's obviously the streaming component, but there's also like how do we really make the most of platforms where there's a huge user base built in, you know, where we can actually engage and activate that user base to drive promotion and awareness for my content. So I think there's a clip that you can play that just show you a little bit about that potential on Facebook Live specifically and some of those social platforms.
Enhance your Facebook Live broadcast. Interact with your audience. Create real-time engagement. Introducing Live Studio, powered by Telescope. Designed exclusively for Facebook Live, Live Studio offers an end-to-end live streaming platform, combining the social engagement power of Facebook with our unique interactive tools to create a dynamic viewing experience like never before. Integrate your audience into your broadcast and surface the best comments quickly through moderation and filters. We offer a range of functionality around reactions to gamify the live experience in a fun and seamless way. Gauge what's important to your viewers with real-time polling applications. Tap into the pulse of your audience by tracking trending hashtags. From standard templates to fully customized branded graphics, we'll work with you to deliver visually engaging streams and meet your brand specifications. Leverage your live audience by retargeting them after the live stream has ended, allowing you to build a direct relationship that can last beyond your initial broadcast. Receive a detailed analytics report giving you an in-depth look at the performance of your broadcast, both as a live video and VOD. Live Studio has been developed to offer a highly customizable solution to deliver engaging live streaming content experiences. Live TV. It's at the heart of what we do. Live Studio, powered by Telescope.
Cool, great. All right, we're here to initiate Jack Patterson, too. He's about a month into his new role at Learfield as VP of Social Media. So, Jack, what's it been like getting comfortable in the new role?
Yeah, it's a really good opportunity. A lot of people are familiar with Learfield. For those that aren't, we control kind of the multimedia and sponsorship rights for about 120 colleges, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Penn State, quite a few of our schools actually are here today. I talked to our friends from Minnesota last night, so good to see our schools here represented well. We're a big kind of name in the monetization and sponsorship side, and I think that's an interesting discussion for this panel, is we tend to think about how we can associate sponsors with great video. And certainly streaming video is a big opportunity. So certainly we want to find the balance of the art of streaming and video and things like that, along with where we can tie sponsors to. At the end of the day, great video and great content has an emotional connection, and that's really what our sponsors are looking for with their schools. So it's been great to work with some of our bigger properties, but really enjoy working with some of the smaller properties as well. We really are teams of one or two in a lot of cases and having to do it all. I will say that just to show that I'm not just going to promote Learfield schools up here, Clemson's done an amazing job, and I think that anyone who's in college athletics knows what Jonathan has set up, and both from an infrastructure perspective and then just the content they're doing. So it's great to be on a panel with Jonathan. I think where we want to try to get to is some of the things that they're doing is that there's a big group here, and Nick does a great job, and a bunch of the other team there is how can they're constantly churning out video, and I think that's where we want to get a lot of our schools thinking about is the opportunities. And as Jonathan said, there's things you can plan for, but more importantly, the things you can't plan for, you just have to be ready to go. And the beauty of it is it doesn't always have to be a shoulder cam, it can be a phone. And I think that's the opportunity as much as anything else.
Cool. And we're also very fortunate to have Jaryd Wilson with us from the Atlanta Hawks. Always good to have someone from the pro side. And if you're active on Twitter and you follow a lot of digital media, which a lot of you do, you know that Jaryd does a fantastic job with the Hawks. So Jaryd, thanks for being here today. Why don't you give a little bit more of your background to everyone?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks everybody. Thanks SVG and NewTek for having me. Yeah. So I manage the content that goes onto our digital platforms. So that's web, social, mobile. You can read the bio in your program if you want to learn a little bit more about me. I don't want to bore you all right now, but just want to say that I have a lot of respect for everybody in this room. I've talked to a lot of people in college athletics, and though I've never worked in college athletics, I know the challenges you guys have in terms of staffing and resources, and you all do an amazing job. Obviously, Jonathan and his team are a great example, but a lot of you are doing great work, and I really admire that, and yeah.
Great. Before we get into the conversation, anyone who's standing in the back, there are some seats available in the front. If you want to fill your way in, feel free to do so. So let's start very broadly, guys, in what, in your opinion, makes a good live social stream. And I'm sure that'll depends on the case, depends on the situation. Let's debate kind of the back and forth of the highly produced Facebook Live with graphics and direct interaction and sharing of tweets or comments or whatever it may be, versus the, hey, you're on the court, throw up the phone, let's go. I imagine time that's appropriate for each of those, but Jonathan, why don't we start? How do you kind of feel about what, in your opinion, makes a good live social stream in the current environment that we're in?
Yeah, at least for Clemson, what we do, our department specifically, to Jack's point earlier, is more like from a phone. So we've done a handful of our traditional broadcast that Rick Bagby heads up our video services group and is as good as anybody in the country at what he does, and that crew's tremendous for our live broadcast, but now a lot of that stuff's going to ACC Digital Network, or ACC Network Extra. There's been a handful of crossover where we've had some non-game events that we broadcasted through, that we streamed through Facebook, but maybe a handful over the course of the last year, and so everything's really been focused for us on mobile. And so I mentioned Nick earlier, but he's a great example of, he's a really talented filmmaker who absolutely could pick up, high-end cameras and get great image quality and get great stories out of that. But it's really fun to see somebody like him, who's a great filmmaker, take those skills to a live broadcast from his phone, because he's got access, because he's a member of the athletic department staff, which is a key advantage for us. And then you get his cinematic eye on a live broadcast situation, and it takes those great stylistic elements of what he's doing for feature video, puts it to live video, and it's just a much more engaging product. I think there's some things that we've done really well. A couple areas we don't do as well is like we don't have a natural on-camera host for these things. And so that makes it a little bit tricky. So a lot of our stuff is more about trying to capture a special moment or access that you wouldn't normally get. But it is a big thing for us moving forward to try to find out how to get people who, you don't have to serve that traditional, sideline reporter role, more of like the vlog style hosting that I think fits better for the social media experience. I think that's what Nick and our video team of students have done so well, is that they've created video content that was formatted really, really well for how people scroll through a news feed. And I think we need to do the same thing for Facebook Live, Periscope, whatever our live streaming would be. So I remember the first time that we were the first sports team to actually do a Facebook Live broadcast. I checked and make sure with Nick Marquez from Facebook today before I came up here. And I remember being in the locker room, and it was before a game in 2015, a couple of years ago. And Nick had told us about it, Nick Marquez, and we were doing it, and DJ Gordon was the one who was on camera. He was giving us a tour. He was an equipment manager at the time, but he's also part of our creative team. He gave us a tour of the locker room, showed us Deshaun Watson's locker, his jersey, and all that sort of stuff. And I remember, like, for you guys, for broadcasters, you probably had this feeling a long time ago, and it's maybe not the same now, but like it was exhilarating because I'm looking at my phone, and it is like the number keeps going up of people who are watching this, all from my phone, which was both scary and overwhelming and exciting at the same time. And we've come a long way since then, and at the Orange Bowl later that year, got to do it from the locker room after we won, which was featured on Facebook's Facebook Live's microsite, promoting all the different Facebook Live broadcasts that they had that were really successful. Had over 1 million views on it. People got to see Coach Sweeney dancing, but also giving a motivational message, which was really cool. So there's a lot for us to be able to focus on and try new things moving forward. For us, the biggest asset, the biggest key to success has been access, really. Putting people in a situation, in a live moment, that they wouldn't be able to see unless we were doing it.
Sure. Now, Jason, from the video that we saw of yours, you're very much, your tool is very much in the business of helping people make that jump from, all right, maybe there's some situations where I don't want to just do the phone. How do those conversations go back and forth and kind of graduating up to that next level, if you will?
Well, I think you and Jonathan outlined different scenarios there where you're filming a game on a court with a multi-camera setup. That's a different environment from locker room where that kind of mobile capture really works. So I think access is a crucial thing, right? And obviously very crucial in sports, that you can get behind the scenes, you can get kind of closer to the action. And I don't think it's sort of binary, because you can still do a lot of the things from, obviously camera technology is getting so much better, but you can still do all those things like add graphics to those, so it doesn't have to be just one or the other. And I think, what we've seen is that audiences don't mind the kind of in fact, they like the authenticity of kind of slightly shaky camera. Maybe the definition isn't quite as good as it kind of would be on a pro camera. I don't think audiences mind that, actually. I think they kind of makes them feel closer to it, and talent is a huge distribution point for people. I mean, one of the things I'd share, and I mentioned it in the intro about the social side of this, is I believe nearly half of viewing on Facebook Live is driven by sharing, i.e. people didn't plan to go there. They saw a notification, they saw a scheduled post, they got, and they then were driven there by the live activity. So I think that's a really crucial bit, is that how, clearly you can stream to other platforms, including your owned and operated sites, but what does social really bring to this? And that's obviously one of those things, a built-in audience that you can activate, and people who maybe weren't planning to view who will go there. So that, really think about that awareness and promotion, as well as just the actual content that's actually on the stream. And the other thing I kind of say that I really like about this, that, again, it doesn't matter whether it's being captured on a mobile or on a kind of professional cameras, is we spend a lot of time, as I mentioned in the intro, trying to engage audiences from platforms like TV, get them into a digital environment, try and get something back to TV. It's a very laborious process. The engagement on these platforms is really native. It's organic to the platform. Like, people are there, they're already commenting. You can kind of, if you can give shout outs to people, if you can feature people, we know that obviously drives engagement, and that engagement in turn also is more likely to mean your stream and your content is surfaced higher up in the algorithm and therefore more discoverable by people. So I'd really think about that engagement and that interactivity and that participation from users, because it, as I said, it's really organic. It's in one place. People are already doing this. They're already commenting. How can you kind of make use of that and really drive the audience and make them part of the broadcast as well? You've all got huge fan bases that are very loyal to your, to your teams. How can we really make the most of that and use the tools that can do that?
Mm-hmm. And Jack, obviously, you've only been on this job for a month, but your extensive career in social media. So, in your opinion, where do you kind of land on this, and what makes a good live social broadcast?
Yeah, I think what I come back to a lot is I think control was something that's always been a factor here, really, with streaming. Right? Is there was a reason why you do production. You could fix the mistakes that you made, go back and correct a few things along the way. I think the beauty of what streaming does is it is spontaneous. It is someone holding a camera, and it might bounce around a little bit, but the user is not expecting perfect video content. What they want is what Jonathan mentioned, is the access. I think anyone who's a big fan of a team is trying to get to places that they can't get to. Anyone who knows me well knows I'm an Oklahoma Sooner fan, and for me to get into locker room scenarios and the things that I can't see, practice, or even an offensive coordinator talking about their offense, those are the things I want to see personally. So I like when, and I know Nick from Facebook is here, he likes when teams are willing to kind of take the chances and kind of let the camera roll a little bit. And I think Oregon during the Final Four certainly stands out as someone who's just pushing out so much content. The beauty of it is I don't think fans were ever getting sick of it. It was just growing and growing and growing. And I think that kind of the sharing and just overall buzz that it creates is super refreshing, because I think there was a time on social where it was very controlled, not only in the posts that you're doing, but then in the content. And certainly, again, not to just push this back to Clemson all the time, but if you're not following some of the things they're doing, you should be, because there's an extraordinary amount of video coming out. I think their views and the engagement they have reflects that. And I think that's some of the things that we're talking about with some of the schools that we work with, is letting go of kind of some of that control that you want to have, that it needs to be pre-produced. All that stuff's great. You can still create beautifully produced kind of hype videos and so many other things. And there's definitely a place for that, no question. That shouldn't go away. But there also is a place when you're willing to kind of turn on the phone and let it go. And whether it's the bus ride to the game, walking into the locker room, post-game stuff, there's always going to be the press conferences. That's easy. Cameras are already there. But I think the challenge for everyone in this room on the streaming side, and there's a ton of schools already doing it, don't get me wrong, is just kind of everyone's trying to do something first and do it best. And I think that's the thing, is there's a huge group of smart people who are trying to do that. So it's definitely a challenge to kind of go beyond what everyone's doing. But I think as both from the athletic side all the way up, and then through the the kind of creative people on the bottom, if you will, constantly challenging that, do we need to pre-produce this? Can we do it live? And what is that going to mean to our fans? Is this the things they're craving? So it's just a huge opportunity, really.
Cool. Jaryd, I know we were talking a couple weeks ago, you said you wish you could do more live social stuff, and I'm sure a lot of people, everyone in this room can relate to the fact that it's like, look, we don't have the manpower to do it sometimes. It's a game day and everyone's roles are assigned. So when you do get the chance to do it, how are you maximizing those opportunities?
Yeah, I think some of it is repeating what some of these guys up here have already said. Situations that you can plan for, where you can have a camera, where you can do some high quality stuff. But I think the beauty of it is, with the phone, you don't necessarily have to have the manpower. You just have to have the login, really. And once you're logged in, I mean, you can go. I think for us, we have to adhere to some league guidelines as a pro sports team, but just in terms of access and knowing what makes good live content, what the fans want, what Jack was talking about. And I think the one thing that I definitely want to, at least what we've seen, is I think length matters as well. Longer is better as what we've seen, because obviously it takes people some time to actually log into their app and open up the video, and if they get the notification, that's awesome, but if they don't and they just happen to be scrolling through, it may take them a few minutes to get to your videos. So we definitely try to put out videos that aren't necessarily over before somebody gets to them. But yeah, I think we've, just with how easy it is now to stream on really all the social platforms that allow streaming, we have trust in our teams to be able to, if they see a good moment, they think this is a good live moment and it's something that fans will relate to, they can just turn it on and go. And I think the ease of it makes the manpower issue at least diminished a little bit.
Cool. This applies for the whole day, but I highly encourage questions from the audience, so don't be shy as far as peppering these guys with questions. I'll keep my eyes on the crowd, and if you throw up your hand and you want to ask them something, please feel free to do so. There will be a mic kind of floating around as well for you as well. So real quickly, we mentioned it, a couple of you dabbled in it a little bit, but let's talk about audience participation, which is so easy because everyone on the internet is so well behaved and supportive and, you know, has very clean mouths and everything. So it's a relatively easy process, but audience interaction, obviously it's what makes it social. What differentiates it from TV. It's a large reason why people watch it, because they sit there and they go, hey, maybe they're going to address my question and everything. So how much are you guys engaging in audience participation in the comments section on any of your live social streams? Jack, you guys did some really good stuff at Learfield this year with the coaches show, and that was obviously built around the idea of people at home being able to ask questions of the coaches. So how do you find yourself kind of moderating that process and letting the people at home feel like they're a part of this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. I mean, social media inherently is based on interaction, and I think there was a time, and I used to work on the pro sports side. I worked for the Washington Redskins, and let's just say that we were not the most aggressive in replying to people. We were a little bit timid, if you will. We were also 4-12 the year that I arrived there, so maybe there's a reason why you don't reply to people. But I think that's changed so much over the years, and there's a big progression into where social is, that there is kind of a two-way conversation going on in a lot of cases. But I'll also say that, you know, if you're coming in kind of timid, I'm not sure social media is really the place for you. I think there's going to be a lot of comments that are going to come in a lot of different ways. Just as much as when you send out a post, people have the ability to reply. It doesn't mean you shouldn't send out posts. I think the video and live streaming is very similar. You can't just have a defeatist attitude that someone's going to have a negative comment, therefore we should not do the video. I think, again, if you look through almost every social feed, regardless of brand, there's probably some sort of negative comment that comes out with a lot of these things. So I think it is what it is, and I think that users take those things kind of, you know, in rhythm and kind of keep moving. I think what I would rather see is fans engaging and saying, like, you know, this is amazing. I never thought I'd ever get into a locker room, or, you know, I can't believe that I could see a coach, you know, driving into his way to work and talking about an upcoming game or whatever it might be. Those comments are, to me, the ones that stick. I think it's easy to focus on the negative one, and someone might screenshot that and pass it along to the offices. I'd urge you to screenshot the great ones too and make sure you're collecting those, because I think it's easy to focus on the one negative one. I think that said, there are, you know, some great technologies that allow you to have a little bit of control into some of those things. Certainly Telescope is one, and there's a handful of others that, you know, people may be familiar with, but I think we would be missing a big opportunity if I think we came into this scared and said that one comment's going to keep us from pushing great content. I think, you know, these guys probably have some anecdotal stories of places where someone's, you know, it's come up, some sort of negative thing. But again, this is social media. I think that people open their phones up on a day-to-day basis, following the things that they want to follow. And if you follow Clemson football or you follow the Atlanta Hawks, first of all, you're going to get some classic content from Jaryd. It's a must follow if there ever has been one on the professional side. But you're following those for a reason. You're not really looking for negative comments. You're actually looking for the great content that's coming out. So anyway, for me, I think you can control some of that, but to miss out on the audience engagement would just be a huge loss. And so we are trying as much as we can to encourage that interaction, to take questions from fans. If you're doing a coach's show, again, I brought up Minnesota earlier. They did a great job of truly taking questions, putting it up on a Chiron, and kind of, you know, ingesting those that way. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it, and really every school is to really work with both the people that they have on the ground, but also kind of what their appetite is for it. And sometimes some coaches might have some pushback. There's some ways you can control some of that a little bit too. But again, I think that interaction is essential, and that's what's going to keep people coming back too. If it's just a one-way thing, then I'm not sure live is really the move. I think the interaction's key.
I think Jack brings up a ton of good points. First, of understanding going in that you can't have full control of it. You're going to have some people that say ridiculous things, and it's just part of the deal. But I think, to his point, I think it's kind of self-policing at this point. People know when somebody's just being a troll and trying to get, trying to get some attention, and they move on. You know, it's just part of the process. But I think, as an industry, we got to be really careful not to just take traditional broadcast and put it onto social streaming. You know, a Facebook Live broadcast it's a totally different experience, and it's a totally different feature set. And you talk about being able to see the comments in real time and the opportunity to hear directly from your audience as they're watching. There's been times for us where, you kind of get in your own little world and you're capturing something and sharing it on a Facebook Live, and you don't realize that you see this stuff all the time, and you don't realize that your audience may be seeing something that is new to them or interesting to them or weird to them or something, and you start seeing comments, and all of a sudden you're clued into something that you thought was not the focus of the broadcast is the focus of the broadcast. So it's a great opportunity to get instant feedback from the people who are engaged with it. I think there's my man DJ Gordon up on the screen doing our first ever Facebook Live broadcast. I've talked about the misses that we've had. Like, we don't do a good job of engaging with comments, and I think that's part of because we don't have a great on-camera personality or host or whatever. I think if we did, it would make it easier to do that sort of thing. I think that for us, moving forward, we need to come up with a plan for that, because the feature set for social streaming, Facebook Live, for instance, it's amazing in terms of the engagement that you can have directly with your audience. And so we need to make sure we're using that. And I'm going to go back to one more point that Jaryd brought up, which is the notification. That's a big deal for someone to get a notification that you're going live. And if I could give one piece of advice, is make sure that you have it really well planned out. And then when someone gets that notification, when they go and click on it, you're delivering value that meets the expectation of getting a notification. And we had a situation where we have a student athlete awards show called the Clemmies, and I think it was about an hour-long broadcast. Again, Rick Bagby and his crew did a great job, multi-camera shoot, more of like a traditional broadcast that we put on social. And I remember to start the show, we had somebody who came up and gave like a 10-minute speech. And it was long, and it was not the most interesting. And I remember just cringing at the idea that all those notifications went out to everybody, and they go to watch the video, and it's not a great experience. And then the next time that they get either they're turning off notifications from us, or the next time they get a notification, they're not going to click on it. And so you've really got to make sure that before you dive into this, that you have a great plan, and that when people do click through to watch it, that you're delivering engaging stuff throughout. Obviously, longer broadcasts do work better, but we've had a lot of those situations where we've got huge reach because Facebook's prioritizing it in the algorithm, but the views don't match up with the reach, and it's because the content's not good enough. So we've got to really come up with a way, a strategy that maximizes the use of being able to ask for comments, respond to comments. If someone's interested, if we're taking somebody on a tour of the field, like, where do they want to go, and then direct the broadcast that way. So I think being able to take advantage of all the features that you have and all the immediate feedback that you have, it's really important to everybody's point here. It can't just be a one-way thing. That's the opportunity that we have with social streaming, is to make it, even in real time, directly tailored to the audience who's watching it right then and there.
I think that's totally right. It's actually that power to adjust the content, like live right there, and hear what people are interested in. And I think the 2 points on, like, you want an element of control. We can't control what goes onto the page, but what you can control is anything that's featured on air, and via moderation, anything that your host is seeing. I mean, one of the things that we saw very early is that when hosts were reading stuff off the page and seeing things that were disconcerting, or kind of trolling kind of content, obviously that's very off-putting for them. So they're kind of trying to present a professional, quality stream, but they're kind of looking down at a comment and seeing kind of criticism. So, what you can do is then moderate those comments and have your production team be kind of feeding those into the host to make sure that they're guiding the content in the direction you want to go, but also that they're seeing the comments that you kind of you're not showing them everything that they're kind of getting. So, and obviously they can be featured on air as well, as it were, in stream. So you can kind of give people recognition that way. We've seen a ton of things like Q&As. They're very popular on Facebook Live, especially. So we've seen a lot of that sort of stuff. I think you saw an example there from Fox Sports as well, where they were kind of taking those sort of questions and then using that as a panel discussion. So, I think to those points, exactly right, is that actually it's the opportunity to have something differentiated from what broadcast is. And, the frustrations of broadcast that it is by and large a one-way medium, or if you want to get anything into the on-air experience, it's actually very complicated and kind of costly. Whereas here, it really is organic, and actually people expect it. So to that point about being bold, I don't think you can go in there with an attitude that we're just going to talk to people, because I think people, your audience is actually expecting to participate and expecting to kind of have their comments heard. And if used in the right way, it's incredibly powerful. And it's incredibly powerful in also driving, driving engagement and then driving, more discoverability of that content. So, my kind of guidance there is to try and harness it as much as you can, not to kind of like try and put it to one side.
All right. In the spirit of audience participation, let's take our first question from the center of the room. Just in case you didn't hear it, with the access, how do you manage the risk of something inappropriate happening? Obviously, you don't want to coach cursing in the middle of something. How do you handle that?
We have had situations where we've cut a broadcast and deleted immediately because I think it was curse words. You've got to know, you've got to pick your spots. And there's a ton of stuff where we wish we could have gone live, and we had the approval to go live, but we just couldn't do it because we couldn't 100%, or at least 90% say that this is going to be a safe, appropriate situation. And so I think most of the time when you're talking about an access situation, to Jason's point, like you're talking about a phone. And so it's ultimately one person whose responsibility. And I think every organization has got one person, at least, who really understands the branding and public relations aspect of things, who probably is in an access situation, and put it on that person. You don't want to, there's a ton of responsibility and empowerment that we give to our students. But you better believe I'm not going to put them in a situation where they're broadcasting live from a locker room or something like that, because there are potential consequences from that. And students there to learn and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. They shouldn't be in that situation. So I think ultimately you've got to have somebody that you really, really trust, who understands the moment and understands the brand. And you've got to be willing to say no to some things that would get a million views and would be a huge hit, but just something could potentially go wrong and it's not worth the risk. But if you've got that one person who you can rely on to make those decisions, and also be ready to pull the plug if something does happen, that helps a lot. And there's been plenty of situations where we either said no before we started, and then one or two situations where we cut in the middle.
I think one thing else I'll say is that there was a time where there was things very siloed within athletic departments in a lot of cases, that football was kind of doing one thing, athletics was doing another, that kind of branding and PR side was a whole other world, and someone has a pretty big brand background. I think you always have to be aware of it, but I think kind of trying to get everyone on the same page is kind of the things that you're trying to do. Here's the things we probably should try to do. Here's the things you should try to avoid. And then I think, obviously, there's an empowerment thing, and I think really, one of the things I think Clemson set up so well is when Dan Radakovich came in, he really enabled Jonathan to start creating things and owning the process. And I think for anyone who's in social, it's refreshing that in college athletics that's starting to happen. Because for a long time, it was more down the line, people were just sending out kind of social media posts by sport. It was really just anything that links back to some press release pretty much, or some sort of final score kind of thing. And I think where that progression is going is just a larger conversation about brand and marketing and engagement and all the things that go with it. So I think when this same type thing is, there's always going to be a little bit of a risk that something's going to happen. But I think when everyone's aligned on kind of to that point, you probably don't want to walk into the locker room live after a winning right when the win happens. Maybe when it calms down a little bit, you're certainly setting yourself up for that. It'd be amazing content, don't get me wrong, but there's a little bit of risk there. But again, I think if everyone's aligned on kind of what you're trying to do and the places you want to be and not be, I think you're probably in a better position.
Okay. Next question right here.
How are you guys handling running up against like the TV rights and when you want to go live on the internet, and the moments that the fans want to see are either right before or right after a game, and especially when you start talking about covering postseason and championships and stuff like that? I mean, you may still be within the TV window. How are you handling that?
Yeah. For us, it's obviously a huge thing with the NBA. These networks are paying millions and millions of dollars for rights to this, and we have to respect that. We have a good relationship with our regional sports network, so in the NBA it's pretty set in stone, right? From an hour before tip until the moment the final buzzer hits, we're not allowed to go live, and that's a rule. If we violate it, we're subject to fine. We're not going to mess with that. But in and around that window, if there's something we want to do, we can reach out to our regional sports network, and if they say it's okay, then we're in the clear to do it. So I think building that relationship with that regional sports network is important for national networks. I think it's more, again, just following I don't know what the collegiate guidelines are or any of that stuff, but for us it's pretty black and white. There's really not a whole lot of gray area there.
Yeah, we're exact same situation. So very black and white. We have great partners at ESPN, but at the same time, they've done a great job of explaining what we can and can't do, and so that makes it easy for us to know what we can and can't do. What we've always done since Dan Radakovich started at Clemson and has built this infrastructure out in our communications team, and Joe Galbraith and Tim Match, is our video services team in-house and then ESPN, they do such an unbelievable job, and there's a lot of folks like that in this room, of capturing the live event, of doing that broadcast, that it just makes very little sense for us to try to do anything that replicates, duplicates, anything that is already covered by that. And so lots of times we tell our staff and students, turn your back on the field and don't capture the 60-yard touchdown pass. Capture the reaction of the student in the student section going nuts when there's a 60-yard touchdown pass. So that's, for the live broadcast, is kind of the same idea for us, is that we can't do a better job. We can't even come close to doing a better job than what our video services team and ESPN does. So where can we be that supplements that complements that? And so, yeah, we have really clear guidelines to follow, which makes it easy, and then our strategy also kind of pushes us to, we wouldn't be pushing up against that most anyway, because our strategy is something different.
Next up.
When integrating sponsors into your live video, how do you find the right balance of giving the sponsor good visibility within the content without sacrificing the organic nature of the content itself?
Yeah, for us, we run into this all the time too. Sponsors want social, right? That's they want social, they want digital, that's what they're asking for. I think we explain to the sponsor that you're going to get more value out of something that the fans think is organic and not an advertisement, right? I mean, most people in this room, as I look around, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of them are either millennial or in that gap. We don't look at ads, right? We look right past them. Billboards, commercials, I mean, we fast forward, we look past it, we flip the page. So explaining that to a sponsor and saying, hey, let's integrate you in an organic way, whether it's native branded or something, product placement, whatever the case may be, getting you and your message integrated with our content is a lot better than slapping a logo on the screen. And it feels like an advertisement, and we've been challenged in a lot of ways, and we still need to improve in that area of how do we integrate sponsors in ways that make sense, how do we use our players when we can, or other talent, or showing their products in ways that tie in with the Hawks brand. And so we're still working on it, but ultimately explaining to the sponsors that they get more value out of doing things that way, like you described, than making it feel like an advertisement. It's beneficial for both parties.
Yeah, and I have many thoughts on this topic as someone who's constantly thinking about monetization, but I think Jaryd brings up a great point. I think too often the trap is to want to do 30-second pre-roll, because that's kind of what they do as commercials, right? And then there's some sort of middle ground where you're like, okay, 15, okay, 5, it's a logo, okay, it's a logo on the bottom right. Or is there going to be integration? I think, to Jaryd's point, if you get back to great content, and you're able to deliver great content, in some ways you're going to get some benefit of the doubt. I don't disagree with what Jaryd said, but I brought up Minnesota earlier. They basically track PJ Fleck around a lot of different places, and he's given their team tremendous access. Really cool stuff, really good behind-the-scenes things that really few coaches are really wanting to fully embrace. And anyone who knows anything about him, I mean, that guy is a quote machine, and he can go viral without even trying. So he's a tremendous kind of subject to film, if you will. So Cub Foods is the sponsor there at our property. And I think fans, in some ways you could say, does that logo really need to be there? But I also bet there's a group of fans that are saying, okay, whether it's PJ or it's Cub Foods or it's Minnesota Athletics, regardless of who it is, that's what's providing us that access that we want, that cool stuff behind the scenes that we didn't do. Now, does that mean they need to have a massive logo or a commercial that goes with that? Probably not. But that association with that content, I think, is the key. And what we talk about a lot, or we're starting to talk about, is creating content series, if you will, and being able to have consistent things that are coming out. And so in this case, PJ is doing a lot of things throughout the week. Cub logos featured there. Great. That's the grocery store. There's a natural connection to that. But when you look even at the sponsors themselves, is in a perfect world, you're finding sponsors that have some brand alignment with what you're doing. If it's a local-based company, how could it be something that talks about local players that started in that market? If it's someone like a Gatorade, and you're talking about people that have worked through, perseverance or injuries or something like that, that's a natural brand fit. So in a perfect world, you're doing some of those things. But I also realize when people come with money, you got to get creative sometimes to make that work. So we're going to try to find that balance. And I think, again, that's that conversation really from our side, from a sponsorship perspective, but then the super creative people in this room who are thinking, okay, football season's coming up. Here's the things that we're going to do during the season. Here's the thing we're going to do even on Tuesday and Wednesday, right? It's easy to focus on what happens on Saturday, but what are we doing midweek? So I think there's kind of ways that we can find sponsors and integrate those in a positive way, but I also not completely dilute kind of what we're doing. So I think the balance is key, and I think there's kind of ways to nuance that, and we'll see that.
I think you guys would probably agree with this. The esports industry is really good at this kind of stuff. The one example that they always love to throw out is Arby's is a big sponsor, and there was one group, it was like a Counter-Strike team or something like that, and they took them to a gun range, and instead of shooting like outlines of a person, they were shooting up Arby's sandwiches, and there's just slow motion shots of sandwiches exploding everywhere. And that was the integration. And so if you've got a good-natured sponsor who will do something fun with you like that, Arby's got a mile and a half out of that. It's pretty wild.
It's also just very early. I mean, if you think about, there's a reason why soap operas are called soap operas. And, TV's had a long evolution of those things. And I think, we're very early in the stages here. And, I think there's a big opportunity around branded content. Facebook, gives 100% of that revenue to the content providers. And obviously they also have guidelines about how they want their users to be, to be treated also. But to the points made here, I absolutely agree that, there's a way of finding that organically, how those things get integrated, what is the right level, of brand integration. And I think people are starting to get creative in those ways and test things out and see what works. There's also a lot of other things the brands get access to, obviously analytics and everything else as well. So I think, people are starting to figure those things out.
Cool. Probably got time for one more question. Yes?
We use Facebook Live a lot at Monmouth, but our biggest problem that we run into is the connection issue. So maybe in the middle of a post-game interview, it'll drop connection. I'm just kind of curious, your advice, do we start a new post? Do we delete the original? What do we do in that situation?
The first thing I'd say is try and get better connectivity if you can, right? And that's an obvious thing to say, but seriously, we've turned up to lots of I think we do around 300 hours a month of kind of where we're powering lives. We learned early on that turning up to a shared Wi-Fi in a hotel, we would do that. Like we turn up and people say, yeah, the connectivity is great. You get there, it's like a shared Wi-Fi kind of network, and it's a nightmare. So the first thing is we actually try and insist on kind of like hardwiring for one thing. So I know it's an obvious thing to say, but connectivity is crucial because without it, you can't do much. There are systems where it will automatically kind of pick back up or have so our system has a kind of if something kind of breaks, there's a kind of default and it kind of comes back up. But I try and make sure the connectivity is good.
Yeah, I feel for you. We've got a very old stadium with a giant concrete structure in a giant hole in the ground. So not great connectivity there. And most of the stadiums that we go to, it's the same thing. So I think that most of the time I just cut my losses. Because if it didn't work the first time, it's probably going to have some sort of issues the second time. And that's the worst thing ever, is when you have multiple times when it's failing. I'll give one more shout out to my boy Nick Marquez here at Facebook. We have a wonderful story that we spent about 2.5 hours, I don't know how long it was, at the national championship game. I was so excited. He was helping to set us up to be the first, maybe like the third overall, like it was National Geographic, maybe second, National Geographic and then us. We're going to be like the second entity ever to do a 360 Facebook live broadcast. We were so excited. We were going to do like a little behind the scenes thing in the locker room and then go out to the field, spend some time setting it all up, and it doesn't work. And then we go back and we're working with engineers at Facebook HQ and on video calls, and we're like, okay, it's going to work, and it doesn't work. And you know, we wanted so badly for that to happen because, one, it was like a really amazing thing for our fans in terms of there were fans who were going to Tampa, but there were a lot who weren't going there, and for them to be taken inside of the locker room before the game and to see the stadium and to be able to tour that, you know, in a 360 experience would have been amazing. And we gave it every shot that we could, but at the same time, at some point, we had to be able to say, you know what, it's not going to work. We got to move on, and that's okay. So yeah, there's plenty of situations where the worst is when it fails in the middle of it. We've had more than those than I'd like to remember, but it's usually best to just kind of at that point cut your losses and move on. So hopefully at some point technology will catch up to what on Facebook and all these great platforms are doing. So.
There are ways of mobile boosting connectivity. I don't know if you looked at those as well, but
we have.
Okay.
You got to trust me. We've tried everything.
All right, Jonathan, Jason, Jack, Jaryd, thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Give them
you,
a round of applause.
Thank you.